November 11, 2025. Developments that could profoundly impact the course of the Ukraine-Russia war are taking place, particularly in the Zaporizhzhia and Donetsk regions. Analysis of the past 24 hours reveals that the Russian armed forces are simultaneously and coordinately applying pressure on several key axes, stretching Ukrainian defenses and achieving significant territorial gains. On the Zaporizhzhia front, the siege operation against the city of Kharkiv, which is the main target of Russian troops and the cornerstone of the region's defense architecture, has significantly accelerated. This advance is central to Russia's strategy of cutting off the connection between Ukraine's southern and eastern front lines and controlling the road to the city of Zaporizhzhia. The most striking development on the Zaporizhzhia front is the confirmation that the settlements of Novo and Novo-Uspenivka have come under complete Russian control. These towns were critical positions located just east of Kharkiv, forming the city's outer defensive line. The Russian Ministry of Defense officially announced that the settlements in question had been liberated. Images and statements from the front lines confirm that Russian flags are flying in these settlements and that Russian infantry and armored units have gained complete control of the area. This success not only gave the Russian army a geographical advantage, but also provided the necessary staging positions for a direct assault on Kharkiv. Military analysts say that with the fall of Novo, Russian forces are now less than 6 kilometers from the outskirts of Kharkiv, putting their artillery systems in a position to effectively strike the city center. Immediately following this advance, Russian troops began to expand their operations westward, advancing toward other critical villages northwest of Kharkiv, such as Robotyne and Yablukova. The strategic value of these settlements is that they control Kharkiv's western approaches and threaten the logistical lines Ukraine uses to supply and reinforce the city. Especially if Yablukove falls, the next target for Russian forces appears to be the village of Satish, another important point located just west of Kharkiv. The capture of Satish would threaten to almost completely encircle Ukraine's forces in Kharkiv, leaving the city's defenders in an extremely difficult situation. Units such as the Vostok Group, which is reportedly responsible for Russia's attacks in this region, and the 36th and 57th Brigades affiliated with the Donetsk People's Republic, are emerging as the main driving force of the operation, leveraging the experience they have gained on the ground since 2014. At the same time, video evidence has been released to the public indicating that Russian control has also been established in Sodor, another neighborhood north of Kharkiv. The Russian flags waving in the area indicate that the attack on the city center is intensifying from all fronts. The Ukrainian side, on the other hand, is forced to rapidly shift its reserves to this region in order to hold Kharkiv. However, this situation risks weakening other critical points on the front. This systematic and multi-pronged assault by the Russian army on Kharkiv reveals that it is becoming increasingly difficult for the city to hold out for much longer. The fall of the city would offer Russia the opportunity to gain control over a large portion of the main road to the Zaporizhzhia regional capital and to deeply penetrate Ukraine's southern defensive lines. While these developments are taking place, there is also significant activity in the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. It is reported that a large part of the town of Doropilia, located outside the settlement of Velikaya Mikhailovka, has come under the control of Russian troops. Doropilia is strategically important as it serves as a natural gateway to enter Velikaya Mikhailovka. The Russian advance here indicates that the front line of the war is expanding westward and that previously relatively stable parts of the Dnipropetrovsk region are now also under direct threat. The Ukrainian army is raising questions about whether it has sufficient reserve units to deal with this new focus of threat. Russia's simultaneous offensives are interpreted as part of a strategy to put significant pressure on the Ukrainian command by diverting resources and attention to several different points. On the Pokrovsk, Krasnohorivka, and Mirnograd fronts in the Donetsk region, another center of gravity for the front, the situation is becoming increasingly untenable for Ukraine. It is reported that approximately 98% of the city of Pokrovsk is under the control of the Russian army, and final preparations are being made for the city's complete cleansing. Although the Russian Ministry of Defense has not yet made an official statement, it has released photos showing that the village of Nativka, southeast of Pokrovsk, has also fallen into the hands of Russian forces. This is an indication that the last remnants of Ukrainian resistance around the city have also been eliminated. The fall of Pokrovsk would represent a massive operational success for Russia. opening the way to the cities of Kramatorsk and Slovyansk, a major logistics and transportation hub vital to Ukraine's defense in the Donbass. In Mirnograd, the situation is even more dire. Su-34 fighter jets belonging to the Russian Air Force are conducting an intense air campaign against Ukrainian positions in and around the city. These attacks, particularly using guided concrete piercing bombs like the powerful FAB-500 and FAB-1500, are systematically destroying Ukrainian trenches, bunkers, and defensive positions. Images from the front lines reveal that vast areas have been completely devastated and show the extent of the destruction suffered by Ukrainian troops. This heavy bombardment is causing Ukrainian soldiers to become exhausted both physically and morally. At the same time, Russian FPV first-person view drone teams are roaming around, launching attacks to cut off any connection with the besieged Ukrainian troops in Mirnograd and completely close off their supply lines. Under these conditions, the resistance capacity of Ukrainian troops in the city is rapidly decreasing, and an increase in the number of surrendering soldiers is being observed. Immediately north of the Pokrovsk and Mirnograd region, and along the Doropilia axis, the dynamics of the war become more complex. Some time ago, the Ukrainian army launched a limited but effective counteroffensive to halt Russia's advance in the Soloto and Kolodias regions and regain some lost positions. This counteroffensive forced Russian troops to withdraw from near Sofivka and Donetsk, providing Ukraine with a temporary operational initiative. However, this success was short-lived. Recent intelligence reports indicate that the Russian army has launched a renewed offensive in the town of Kharkiv and is making significant advances. Although Kharkiv appears to be a small settlement, it is located at an extremely critical logistical crossroads. The side controlling Kharkiv gains a vital base to advance north toward Novotoretsk and Mayak, or at least to block their opponents' movements in that direction. Images showing Russian troops entering the northeastern parts of Kharkiv indicate that fierce fighting continues there. Russia's aim is considered to be breaking the counteroffensive momentum of Ukraine on the Doropilia axis and restarting an advance in the northern direction. In the northeastern part of the front, in the Kharkiv region, the situation is becoming increasingly worrying for Ukraine. The city of Kupansk has become an area of intense siege and conflict for the third time. Kent was captured by Russian forces in 2022, followed by Ukrainian forces, and now the Russian army is making its final push to take complete control of the city. Ukraine's attempts to launch counterattacks to rescue its besieged troops failed, resulting in heavy losses against Russian artillery and FPV drone attacks. Current reports indicate that Russian troops are closing in on the city center and that very little Ukrainian-controlled territory remains within the administrative borders of Kupiansk. The city's official fall is seen as a matter of moments. The loss of Kupiansk would give Russia a major operational advantage in its eastern approaches to Kharkiv and create a position that directly threatens Kharkiv, Ukraine's second-largest city. In addition to these developments in Kupiansk, Russian forces increased pressure on the town of Borova, another strategic point southeast of Kharkiv. Borova, a settlement that has long been on the Russian military's target list and is of key importance for establishing a bridgehead in the direction of Kharkiv. Russian troops are reportedly entering the outskirts of the town, and heavy fighting is taking place. This maneuver is considered a diversionary or pressure tactic aimed at further straining the resources Ukraine will use to defend Kharkiv and distracting the Ukrainian command's attention across a wide front line. Russia's ultimate goal is to create favorable conditions for an offensive against larger settlements, such as Veliki Burluk, which is one of the region's most important strongholds. In the shadow of all these developments, perhaps the least noticed by the media, but of very high strategic importance, Bolchansk. Bolchansk, which can be described as the southern gate of Kharkiv, has been largely destroyed due to months of intense fighting. Despite this, the struggle for control of the city continues. In recent hours, it has been reported that the Russian army has made significant advances in the forested area south of the city and near the Boksha River, thus beginning to threaten the last lines of Ukrainian resistance. Military observers believe that the complete capture of Bolchansk by Russia would herald a long-term Russian offensive against Kharkiv. The city's fall, which began in May 2024, will bring an end to one of the longest-running battles of the war. In summary, mid-November 2025 marks the beginning of an extremely challenging period for the Ukrainian front. The Russian army is successfully implementing a coordinated and multi-pronged strategy in Zaporizhzhia, by encircling Orikhiv, in Donbass by clearing Pokrovsk and Mirnograd, in Doropilia by regaining the initiative, and by creating new threats toward Kupansk and Kharkiv. The Ukrainian army, however, is trying to withstand this massive pressure with limited manpower, ammunition, and air defense systems. The speed and scope of military aid from the West will be decisive in shaping the front lines in the coming weeks. For Ukraine to effectively counter Russia's systematic attrition and advance strategy, it urgently needs to strengthen its tactical defense capabilities and find ways to balance Russian air superiority. Otherwise, the current military dynamics could show a permanent shift in Russia's favor. Don't forget to share your thoughts by subscribing, liking, and commenting on the video. Near the village of Novosergeyevka, UAV operators belonging to the Russian armed forces detected and destroyed a 2S-1 Gvozdika self-propelled howitzer belonging to the Ukrainian armed forces. Russian FPV drone operators attacked a position belonging to a Ukrainian armed forces UAV crew in the direction of Kharkiv. The attack resulted in the destruction of Ukrainian forces' equipment and the position. On the Luhansk line, Russian FPV drone operators continue to detect and destroy buildings where Ukrainian armed forces soldiers are stationed. A Grad MLRS crew from the 61st Separate Marine Brigade of the Central Group of Forces, CGF, of the Russian Federation, destroyed a Ukrainian position along the line of contact in the northern Donetsk People's Republic. Simultaneously, a Grad MLRS from the Vostok Group of Forces struck a similar target in Zaporizhzhia Oblast. The Russian armed forces continue to target Ukrainian armed forces vehicles, positions, and equipment. FPV UAV crews from the Southern Group of Forces destroyed an enemy armored personnel carrier and an armored vehicle on the Zaporizhzhia line. Attack UAV operators from the Central Group of Forces located and destroyed concealed positions and personnel of Ukrainian armed forces units in the Krasnoarmeysk region. UAV crews from the Eastern Group of Forces destroyed the control antennas of Ukrainian armed forces UAVs in the Dnipropetrovsk region. Snipers from the 51st Guards Combined Arms Army, part of Russia's Central Group of Forces, are providing air support to assault forces in the Krasnoarmeysk direction. They intercepted Ukrainian drones one by one, preventing further attacks from Ukraine. Gvozdika self-propelled howitzers belonging to the 44th Army Corps of the Russian North Group continued to destroy camouflaged positions of the Ukrainian armed forces in the Kharkiv region. Artillery units of the 35th Army of the Russian Eastern Group of Forces struck Ukrainian armed forces positions in the Zaporizhzhia region, destroying Ukrainian engineering structures, electronic countermeasure systems, and personnel. In the direction of Donbass, EFP-5 teams belonging to the Russian armed forces detected and destroyed ground robotic platforms carrying ammunition, food, and medicine to Ukrainian soldiers. The Russian armed forces destroyed a command center belonging to the 20th Separate Electronic Warfare Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces with Garin kamikaze drones near the village of Oktyabrsk. On the Sumy line, Russian FPV drone operators decommissioned another pickup truck belonging to the Ukrainian armed forces. UAV operators from the Russian Western Group of Forces discovered a concentration of armored vehicles identified as belonging to the Ukrainian armed forces near Kupansk. Using fiber-optic drones, FPV drone operators destroyed 5 Ukrainian infantry fighting vehicles positioned along railroad tracks and a road in a forested area. Combat vehicles and ammunition belonging to the 116th Separate Mechanized Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces were rendered unusable. Assault units of the 127th Motorized Rifle Division of the Russian Eastern Group of Forces captured over 25 square kilometers and liberated the villages of Sladko and Novoye in Zaporizhzhia Oblast. The Ukrainian armed forces suffered significant losses in personnel, equipment, and weapons, while armored vehicles, small arms, and ammunition remained in their positions.